From the overhyped Black Adam earning more at the box office, to being in the same league as the franchise killer Batman and Robin, these are the superhero movies that performed better than The Flash. I'm gonna kick things off with Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam, which brought in under $400 million at the box office. That might sound like a lot, but the film cost anywhere from $190 to $260 million to make. And when you add marketing costs on top of that, it basically failed to break even. It's easy to see why Black Adam's widely considered a failure, but The Flash makes it look like a blockbuster by comparison. The Ezra Miller-led film has only managed to scrounge up about $210 million by the end of June 2023, or in other words, just over half of Black Adam's total haul. Sure, The Flash still has some time to boost its revenue, but all told, it'll be a $200 million loss for Warner. You've got to understand, the studio was relying on The Flash to help launch James Gunn's DCU, and it got around the same budget as Black Adam. Most films earn the lion's share of their box office revenues during the first couple weeks, so Andy Muschietti and the folks at Warner are potentially looking at a catastrophic failure here. The fact that it's struggling to compete with Black Adam, a film that got a miserable 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, just goes to show how badly it was handled. Sure, The Flash got more praise from the critics than Dwayne's superhero flick, and a segment of fans will stop at nothing to defend it, but that doesn't change how badly it performed. Look, the DCEU's put out some real stinkers during its troubled history, but every single one of them surpassed The Flash's box office haul. I mean, even Suicide Squad did better. And no, I'm not talking about James Gunn's spectacular 2021 film here. That's The Suicide Squad. Unfortunately, since it was released in 2021, most of the world was still under lockdown at the time. So despite being one of the best things to come out of the DCEU, the movie earned just $167 million against a $185 million budget. Now, the film I'm actually talking about is David Ayer's Suicide Squad from 2016, which might have given us the most awful interpretation of the Joker in living memory. Thanks, Jared Leto. Maybe try taking some acting classes next time. Anyway, there's really not much good I can say about this movie. Its 26% score on Rotten Tomatoes speaks for itself. And apart from introducing Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn to the world, it ended up being a muddled, disappointing, and ultimately forgettable project. And do you want to know how much cash this raked in? $750 million plus change? That's over triple what The Flash made. And if the movie got beaten out by Suicide Squad, I'm seriously concerned about the future of the franchise. This wasn't the only bad DCEU film that performed better than The Flash. For example, the Justice League might be in the same league as The Dark Knight now, because it sure feels that way after The Flash hit rock bottom. There was a ton of buzz in the lead up to this film because it was supposed to be Warner Brothers' answer to the Avengers. They'd been envious of Disney's success with the MCU for a while now, and considering it was bringing iconic characters like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman together for the first time, it should have made an easy $1 billion at the box office. The thing is, Zack Snyder had to leave the project after his daughter tragically passed away, and the guy that replaced him nearly ruined the DCEU forever. I'm talking about Joss Whedon, of course, and let me tell you, he really did a number on his predecessor's passion project. The one-liners seemed forced and out of character. The plot contradicted a lot of the lore set up by previous films, and overall, the Justice League spelled the beginning of the end for the DCEU. I doubt James Gunn would have had to do something as drastic as a reboot had it not been for Whedon's colossal mess-up, but miraculously, even he didn't do as bad as Andy Muschietti. Don't get me wrong, the film was a failure, because it fell about $100 million short of its break-even point, but that still comes up to $657 million at the box office. Okay, I feel like I'm being a bit unfair towards the DCEU. While the MCU's output has been unbelievably consistent, it's had its fair share of flops. But despite that, they're starting to look pretty good now that The Flash's release went so poorly. Just for starters, there's Thor, The Dark World, which most fans consider to be the weakest entry in the Infinity Saga. I mean, can anyone even remember the villain? Anybody? Hello? He was played by Christopher Eccleston, aka Doctor Who, aka someone you should really remember if you consider yourself a nerd. Nothing? Didn't think so. Don't worry though. Eccleston's character Malekith is all too easy to forget. Not only did this movie squander his formidable talents, but it also made Thor seem like the most boring Avenger. It wasn't until Taika Waititi revamped him in Ragnarok that Thor finally found himself a personality. That said, The Dark World is only a failure by MCU standards. This is a franchise with 10 films that have earned over $1 billion, so The Dark World's haul of $645 million must have seemed like a disappointment. Imagine what they must be thinking now that Warner has such a historic disaster on their hands. Now, the first films based on Marvel characters came out well before the MCU started, and most of those films, like Spider-Man and X-Men, are still GOAT superhero flicks in my opinion. That is, if you ignore the bafflingly bad Spider-Man 3. Sam Raimi brought the wall crawler to the big screen in the early 2000s, and his first two films had no business being as good as they were, but things went sideways with the last installment of the trilogy. I don't think anyone needs to be reminded of that cringe sequence where Peter walks down the street, and that dorky little dance he does honestly had me laughing out loud in the theater. Even if we ignore all that, the movie had way too many villains, and it just wasn't able to handle all those storylines properly. Don't even get me started on Peter's fling with Gwen. Like, if they wanted to bring her into the series, why couldn't they do that earlier? And did they really have to ruin Peter and MJ's iconic upside-down kiss like that? Man, Spider-Man 3 might be the most disappointing movie on this list, at least in my opinion, but the box office earnings tell a different story. The movie earned just under 900 million big ones, and this was back in 2007, when it was a much more impressive feat. It really seems like The Flash has a uniquely bad place in movie history. I mean, I'm seriously giving it a fighting chance here with these other films, but you know what? Let's go all the way and compare The Flash's performance to the worst one of all. Batman and Robin. Even if you were lucky enough to know nothing about this movie, George Clooney's cameo at the end of The Flash probably filled you in. And it's hard to find a film that's as universally hated as Batman and Robin. Plenty of people even call it the worst movie of all time, period. Which isn't surprising given its 12% score on Rotten Tomatoes. The film was packed with cheesy one-liners from its characters, making intimidating supervillains like Mr. Freeze say stuff like, "Ice to see you." Honestly, the film was so bad that it sent Warner into panic mode, with the studio quickly canceling the planned sequel. In fact, we didn't even get another Batman film until 8 years later, when Christopher Nolan finally decided to give his gritty, realistic take on The Dark Knight in 2005. And what was the box office total for this franchise-ruining film? $238 million. Yet again overshadowing The Flash despite being a glorified 2-hour toy commercial. That's actually a pretty big concern, because if Batman and Robin was a franchise killer, The Flash might be just as bad. I just don't see the movie getting a sequel, at least not with numbers like these. Andy Muschietti has said that he'd only make The Flash 2 if Ezra Miller could return to the role. But the execs at Warner, along with James Gunn and Peter Safran, said that depended on the film's box office earnings. Now that The Flash is a confirmed flop, there's no chance that the studio will move ahead with a sequel. Besides, Muschietti's got a new Batman film to work on, and I doubt he'll mind laying The Flash to rest once and for all. So from being in the same league as the franchise killer Batman and Robin, to even Black Adam earning more, these were the superhero movies that performed better than The Flash.